Have you ever heard the garden adage, plant your potatoes when the dandelions bloom? We did some research to see what the truth is behind that science. Guten gardening, everybody! I'm trying to give you a really good shot of the dandelions behind me because for sure, the first dandelions of spring have definitely sprung up. And if that adage about planting your potatoes when the dandelions bloom is accurate, then right now here in Zone 5, Wisconsin should be a really good time to get our potatoes planted, or at least start planting our potatoes. So in this video, we want to take a closer look at the validity of that statement and also show you some of our potato gardening practices. Now, I promise you the focus of this video is potatoes, but I do want to know, when you were younger, what did you say having a dandelion underneath your chin and it turning it yellow meant? For us, it was that we loved butter. Is that the same for you? Let us know in the comments. Now, in order for us to get into the science, let's first talk a little bit about potatoes. Potatoes are a cool weather crop, but they require soil temps to be around 50 degrees consistently and up in order for them to sprout and start developing. And that's where the dandelion blossom comes into play, because dandelions really start to grow and develop once that soil temperature hits 50 degrees Fahrenheit. So if these are up and these are blossoming, in all likelihood, the soil has warmed up enough that these can be planted. Now, I think it's important to note that depending on where you're planting, even in a centralized area like here at Guten Gardening, if we're planting in a raised bed versus in-ground, etc., the temperatures and the weather can vary. Now, there are a couple of different ways to try to determine the soil temperature in your bed right now. If you have a built-in thermometer in your finger, you can... No, I'm just kidding. One easy way is to go online and you can search. There are websites dedicated to figuring out the average soil temperature in your area. So when I looked at one of those websites for the average temperature in our area, it said that for the last 48 hours, the average temp was about 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, that's not nearly as dependable, though, as if you have your own soil thermometer, which isn't all that expensive to buy. We'll put a link to one in the description. And then you can take that to each bed and leave that in there for a brief period of time and know the exact temperature. But once the ambient temperature starts to consistently warm up, once we see these dandelions popping up and blooming, then we can pretty much be assured that the temperature of the soil here is going to be warm enough for those potatoes. And the potatoes, when they're underground and protected, they can handle a light frost anyway. And so it's time to get them planted. Now, with our dandelions in bloom, our soil temperature is warm enough for planting, we need to prep our beds. And that bed prep may look slightly different depending on your growing medium. But in general, we need to add some organic matter to our bed in the form of compost, worm castings, or in the case of our vertical roost style beds, we're adding more hay to the top. And with our more traditional roost style bed, we're going to be doing the same thing, because over the winter time, the hay here has compressed and really broken down nicely, but we need to continue to add that organic matter to refill this bed. Look at that beauty. Everybody loves a good worm in the garden. Now, in addition to adding organic material to our bed, we also do a soil test typically to determine what nutrients we need to add so that we can fertilize and amend as necessary. And while we don't till our beds, for many of you, you're going to find that that's the time that you're tilling and you're creating furrows in your bed. And the thing to remember about potatoes is, regardless of if you have determinate or indeterminate, you're still going to want to mound your potatoes. That hilling is going to help the indeterminate varieties of potatoes to produce more, and it's going to keep the potatoes for the determinate varieties from popping up to the surface and getting solanine damage, that greening on the potatoes. Now, we've done a pretty good amount of content on the actual planting of potatoes. One of my favorite videos is where we plant our purple Magic Molly potatoes. But what you want is a loose, well-draining soil. We typically plant our potatoes at about 4 to 6 inches in depth and about a foot apart. And at the time of planting, we like to add some mycorrhizal underneath to help with root development. So keep that in mind. That's just something we've been doing the last couple of years and have enjoyed the results. Now, one of the things about growing potatoes that makes it so exciting to us is just the wide variety of potatoes that there are and the wide variety of tastes and textures of potatoes that you can explore and experiment around with. In front of you, you see 3 of those varieties that we grew last year, and you can see this one has chitted about an inch. The sprouting is coming up nicely. This one's ready to go, and these are about a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch, which is far enough along. These are our French fingerlings. These are going to be 4th generation this year. So there's a ton of different varieties. Now, if you're brand new to planting potatoes, you'll likely find at your local nursery some varieties that are good fits for your area. They typically carry the ones that have produced well if you want to get off to that good start. But I do recommend looking now and not waiting, especially if you're in grow zone 5 like we are, because those seed potatoes go really fast. Now, when it comes to plant care over the life of the potato plant, it's actually fairly straightforward, but we like to give it a nice heavy watering if we haven't had any rain, at least once a week, to give it somewhere between 1 to 2 inches of water per week. And a heavy watering that soaks way down is going to help those roots grow down instead of having just a superficial watering that's going to stay at the surface. That's not ideal for your potatoes. And in terms of fertilizer, depending on the nutrient content of your soil, we like to keep an eye on it, but we typically feed ours about every 1.5 months. And we definitely give it a good feed after the flowers begin to blossom, when a lot of that growth takes place for our tubers. Now, how do you know when your potatoes are ready to harvest? Well, they'll definitely tell you, because the potato will die back. And we usually wait another week after our potatoes have died back, after the tops have turned brown, before we harvest. And if you don't want to wait that long and you want some of the smaller potatoes, you can actually get in there while the plant is still green, and you can harvest some new potatoes. And you can just pull up one plant and see the size of the potatoes underneath, see if that's good enough for you, and you can get those harvested. The new potatoes tend to be a little bit sweeter, and the skin on the new potatoes is a little bit easier to scratch, but they are definitely delicious. Well, there you go, folks, a little crash course on planting your potatoes based on the timing of this dandelion. You know, the dandelion's a pretty amazing plant, and I definitely don't go around picking dandelions and eating them, especially from other places where I don't know if they've sprayed anything, but they're delicious on salads. They're delicious just in general, and they make great tea. So if you'd like to see a video about the amazing dandelion, let us know. But one thing's for sure, I've got my work cut out for me. I've got a lot of potatoes to get in the ground, in our beds, in our vertical garden, in our roof stout bed. And when it comes time to harvest here in 3 to 4 months, believe me, we're gonna take you along for the ride. It's one of our favorite things to do, harvesting potatoes and sweet potatoes. So let's get the rivalry started right now. If you're on Team Potato this season, go ahead and leave us a comment with hashtag Team Potato down below. Thank you all so much for watching this video. We hope you found it informative and useful. If you did, don't forget to give us a like, leave us a comment, remember to share and subscribe, and most importantly, remember, when you're with us, you are good to grow.